What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And I know these videos are kind of coming out back to back, but I have to make a video on this because Aaron Glenn officially is leaving the Detroit Lions as their defensive coordinator to head to the New York Jets as their next head coach. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with some Detroit Lions news. Now, I plan on doing some sort of live stream or something to dive into this a little bit more, kind of discuss this whole situation. But I wanted to just do a quick update video because I have the show tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be live over on Bleacher Report, and I want to talk about some defensive coordinator options, probably in-house tonight, so definitely tune into that. But I have to prep for that video, so definitely tune into that tonight. I have to make this video a little bit quicker. I think we all anticipated this was going to happen. It was either going to be the Jets or the Saints, and I had heard that the Jets didn't want him to leave the building without a contract, and then he did, and I had like kind of a slimmer of hope, like, well, maybe there's a chance he does return, maybe he doesn't want to leave, I don't know. But no, it is official. He's off to the New York Jets, and I think this is an excellent spot for Aaron Glenn. I mean, it's going to be a real challenge over there. They need to figure out who's going to play quarterback. That's a huge step, but they have a ton of talent, and I think for the Jets and what they have defensively, this is going to be a really good spot for him. He's going to get the best out of those guys because he's going to instill belief in those players, and that's what they need. They just need patience at the ownership level because I know defensively, with the talent that they do have, those guys are going to believe in themselves. He's going to put responsibilities in those defensive players' hands, and I think that's going to lead to success if you allow patience from the top down. So I'm definitely rooting here for Aaron Glenn because Aaron Glenn grew a ton. I mean, this wasn't a guy that had defensive coordinator experience. I remember when we would hire a defensive coordinator, I was like, I want Wade Phillips. I mean, it was a while ago, but they went out and hired Aaron Glenn. Didn't know a lot about him at the time. Knew he was a secondary coach. Knew there was connections. And Aaron Glenn has been fantastic as the Lions defensive coordinator. He got better across the board every single season as the talent also improved and the continuity within this Lions defense improved. Of course, there's issues like this past season with the amount of injuries that you deal with, and things will take a step back, and you do have changes. And I didn't think constantly we had the best game plan in the world heading into each week, but what I did think is that especially this season, Aaron Glenn took a major step. I mean, this guy has always put that kind of trust in his players, and I think he's instilled that confidence to believe in those guys. I think sometimes even to a fault in the past. Ranked last season as the #1 defensive coordinator in football. There was a lot of love around the league for what Aaron Glenn was as a coach, and he instilled kind of what Dan Campbell said that he's still looking for, which is he wants to play man coverage, he wants to bring pressures, and Aaron Glenn was the perfect fit. They were on the same timeline for that. Now, there was adjustments, there was differences based on the personnel. Early, of course, it was Amani and it was Okuda, and there were some differences. They still wanted to play man, but there was a lot more cover 3 mixed in back at that time. There was a lot of single high coverage, but there was some differences in how they did things stylistically. Up front, there were a lot of changes in terms of how they came in and tried to use Trey Flowers and Romeo Okwara versus where it is now. Just the front 7 and the schematic changes that have taken place there. But over time, as they've continued to build this core, and Alex Anzalone was the guy that kind of got this thing started. Then you add the draft picks, and I was looking back at some of my old graphics of like, okay, who's leading this defense? The veterans are leading the team. And the guys that I had listed are some of the same players, but also now it's truly those guys that the Lions drafted have become the leaders of this defense. You think about the leaders and the guys that go above and beyond, off the script a little bit to go make a play, the guys that are constantly involved in the communication. I think of Kirby Joseph actively every single play, ability to handle multiple responsibilities when we were injured at the safety position. I mean, he handles the free safety. He's a single high that can cover a ton of ground, and he's perfect for that role, but he's improved as a man coverage player. He's added the element of, he's been a really nice run defensive player, and he's been such a great communicator at the back end that he's really taken on that positional group of the safety position for the Lions, and it's allowed a guy like Brian Branch, who very quickly has become a glue guy for this Lions defense, another draft pick, into being able to play that slot role and play safety and have flexibility there. And the Lions, to their credit as well, one thing we have to say is they've always had kind of an eye for like what positions could these guys be, not just what they are now, but what could this actually turn into. I mean, you think Derek Barnes, they thought originally this could be a Mike Backer. Look back a couple years now, we look back years later, now he's playing Sam Backer, and it's like that's the fit for Derek Barnes. That works perfectly. Even to a guy like Levi this year, you're thinking, okay, defensive tackle, like let's try defensive end for what we're trying to do. Ends up being a defensive tackle with injuries, but there was an idea of flexibility there. I think of Alex Anzalone and the way that things kind of changed when you add Jack Campbell and you allow Alex to play the Will Backer position, and even he showed the kind of flexibility he has, all the way to the safety position of when they drafted Brian Branch, and they're playing him at slot corner at first. They're playing him the nickel like he did at Alabama, but it was like, hey, year 2, we think that this could really be good at safety, and he was fantastic at safety until, again, injuries, and if he's not there, so you move him back to slot. And it works out. They've always had an eye for, like, what could a guy be? Ify Melifonwu was a great example, right? Cornerback, really never played cornerback. I mean, he played a little bit, and he actually flashed pretty well, but it was like, we're going to move this guy to safety. And through all the injuries, when we've seen him at safety, he's been really good there. I think there's still growth that needs to be had, but I think it's because he hasn't had that much opportunity because of the injuries. The point is that he's always had a really good eye, as well as the rest of that defensive staff, at what certain guys could potentially become, what traits that they have that they could potentially get to a certain positional group and have the most success, what spot they could put them in to have the most success. And I think that's being on the same page with a guy like Brad Holmes, but it also is the coaching staff to take that player, recognize the skill set, and say, how is this going to work best? And they've done a great job at that, and it shows over the years the different schematics that they've had as a whole, but also still having a foundation of what they want to be. And I think we saw this last year, really kind of everything came together of, we've had this constant foundation that we've built, and we've had this identity of who we want to be defensively. Man coverage, blitzing heavy, aggressive identity defensively, and how we want to play the run. And all of that kind of felt like it came together, with the veterans now being the young guys in the back end at the second level. Jack Campbell taking over for Alex when he's not there, leading the league in run stop rate, just having a nasty season, just took off this past season. Guys like that, Ali McNeil, right, the flexibility he has, and then Levi having to step up this season, and Aiden Hutchinson becoming the best defensive end in football. So there's been that growth at cornerback. I mean, that's been a kind of a carousel, and then this year they get some veterans in the building that are comfortable playing to his scheme. Carlton Davis, Amik Robertson, you add more young guys, Terrion Arnold, which I would love to see these guys keep growing with Aaron Glenn, but Terrion Arnold and his Rakestraw in the future. And once you throw that together, the numbers say that, yeah, this was a fantastic defense by the Lions. 7th in points per game. Situationally, they were always really good, really from 2023 on. I mean, going back to the 2023 playoffs, I think was the first time you really recognized, like, man, they're really good in the red zone. The flexibility that they had. I mean, they were truly a team that was like, it's going to be hard to score touchdowns against these guys. And the pass game especially, they had playmakers in the back end at safety. They had a ridiculous amount of flexibility. They had guys that would play fast. I mean, you think about Will Harris playing in the slot. He played so fast in the red zone. They just had a lot of high football intelligence, and they knew exactly what they are, and everybody was on the same page. So when the field condensed, we didn't have to have the best players, but we had a team that played fast, and they played together. And that was where Aiden Hutchinson, you remember the one time he slants inside and the quarterback takes off, gets outside of the pocket, scores a touchdown, and it's like, well, what's the blame for allowing that to happen? And he's like, look, we give those guys that control at the line of scrimmage, and that was Hutchinson at the time. So they allow those guys that opportunity and that responsibility. And I think what's so great about Aaron Glenn is, outside of just the pressers and how great he's been at the pressers and the way that, you know, he's been honest with the fans and he's been straightforward, and the way that he's talked about his players, the way he shed light on these guys. I mean, it's been fantastic just to listen to him. And as a leader, the fact that he's grown from schematics in terms of, Glenn wasn't, you know, like a one-trick pony and like, okay, this is all we can do defensively. That wasn't the defense. I mean, there were differences. You could see game plan specific defensive plans that the Lions were capable of, especially with a veteran backfield. And, you know, you saw the match coverage against Green Bay, as I always point out. And you would see, you know, the palms looks against the Indianapolis Colts team. And they would ultimately find a way. They always had the foundation of who they wanted to get to. And the thing is it made sense to always want to get to that, because over the years, they've been really good when they've gotten to that foundation of man coverage. That's what they're best at. That's what they're most comfortable in. So they were able to continue building towards a common goal. And then ultimately, that's what they were most consistent in, was playing those kind of things. I mean, it would get knocked, but it didn't really make sense because statistically, they were always good. Cover 0, cover 1, 2-man coverage. They were always grading man coverage across the board. One of the best EPAs this season across the board. And they've done it with great linebacker play in Alex Anzalone, who fits perfectly for that, right? The safety position that you have, the flexibility that you have. I want growth there from Ify, but still, really good safety unit that's improved in man coverage. Even Tracy was improving in man coverage when we had him kind of lined up for both things to work, but at the same time, I love the fact that every week it felt like there was something unique about the game plan for who we were facing. It wasn't the same thing every single week, and I could really appreciate that there was something unique. That doesn't mean it was always going to work, but there was always something different that we would find. They were trying to approach it, and coverage was always having that foundation of who they were going to get back to. And that foundation was something that they could lean on situationally, right? Situationally, they had a foundation of what coverages we like to get to, right? The combo coverages we like to get to in these spots. And then they would have the cover 4 that they would like to get to. And then on third down, it was cover 1. Usually it was a blitz. And because they had that foundation, everybody was playing so fast in those spots that it worked. And again, I don't think it was constantly perfect. I didn't think it was a great game plan really across the board against Washington. But I think for a majority of the time, the fact is there's growth there. It's not like it's been the same defense and it's like, oh, you plug in a player and then that's what changes everything. Like, there's been growth from Glenn, and there's been changes from Glenn, and there's been uniqueness to game plans. And that's what I appreciate the most about what Aaron Glenn here did schematically for the Lions. And I think the numbers kind of all bear that out. The idea of playing that much man coverage it works in the NFL, right? Teams aren't comfortable with seeing that constantly, and a lot of teams don't see that constantly. So for us, as Dan Campbell said it would be coming into the year, that was their run game. That was their thing that was like, okay, we're going to get to this, and how are you going to perform against it? And in the past, the Lions could use it in times, but it could also become an issue. But you would see it. You would see stretches like the first time we played Green Bay last year and we lost. When we played man coverage, he's completing 50% of his passes. When not, he's completing almost every pass. So when we were able to get to that, we had the personnel to kind of back it up. You could see how well that the Lions, how tough it made the Lions defense, even with the run defense taking a step back. And we need better, depth probably on the defensive line heading into this season. Hopefully the injuries and things like that, because stack box versus non-stack box, it was a problem. But the Lions and who they were built to be, they played really well within that area. They played fast. They hit guys. I love the mentality of how they did things defensively. Overall, man, I'm going to miss this dude in Aaron Glenn because, again, it wasn't perfect, and there were things that would be messy. But at the same time, it was his first time as a defensive coordinator, and the guy grew and he got better. And I think that's all you can ask for, because that's just human nature. You're going to grow. Teams are going to come up with new things, and you have to adapt. And he was constantly able to adapt. Did it always work? Not always, right? But he would adapt. He adapted in our last game against Washington. There was changes through the game schematically. There absolutely was, and we went through those. So there was always that. He's in top pressure team of football. This year, still one of the top pressure teams, even with Hutchinson missing most of the year and McNeil missing a lot of the season. So they really had a vision of who they wanted to be, and they became that. And that, to me, is what's so impressive about this. Now, for the Lions side of things, what they're going to get out of this is 2 comp picks in the 3rd round, which is fantastic because the Lions didn't have a 3rd-round pick set for this season, but they're now set to get 2 comp picks. It's projected right now to be pick 101 this year. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, a 6th-round pick, and 2 7ths, which puts them in a really good spot for draft picks. Really good spot without having that 3rd-round pick, which last year they traded up for Giovanni Manu to get back into the 4th round. And then the year after that, they're now set with a 1st, 2nd, 2/3, a 4th, 5th, and 2 7ths. So they're in a really good spot after earning those comp picks as well. But it's not going to be easier to place this guy. And Alex has praised him. A lot of people have praised him for his leadership style. He clearly gives the vibe of like, yeah, this is the kind of guy that's going to work from that. I know he's going to pull that locker room together. I don't doubt that at all. He seems to be authentic as they come. So I expect that that's going to happen. We'll see how it works around him. I'm rooting for him. And then for the Lions side now, it's who's next. And again, we're going to dive into this more on Bleacher Report tonight. So tune in 6 p.m. Eastern time. For time reasons, I got to kind of keep this thing moving. But I do think that still Kelvin Shepard's probably top of the list for me, just because he's been in-house. I think that working with outside linebackers to inside linebackers, the growth that we've seen, it would make sense that he could kind of carry on who the Lions want to be and what they've continued to build through, because I think that just makes sense. I think it could absolutely still be an outside option because there are guys that will play man coverage. Denver did a lot this season, for example. Teams will do that. Teams can still play to the identity that the Lions were while also having their own uniqueness, because it wasn't like the Lions' run defensive scheme was always the exact same or their coverage was always the exact same. They just had a foundation. So as long as the guy has that foundation that he's willing to get to, I think Dan Campbell would be happy. Shea Townsend has a case. He's only been here for a season, but they did a fantastic job in the back end. Yes, got a lot more talent, but they did a really good job in the back end this past season. And him also working as the pass game coordinator defensively gives me more optimism because of what the Lions pass defense did this season, that would be a good fit. It felt like a really big jump from what we had in the past as our defensive backs coach. So I think he's still in the play. I think those 2 guys kind of set the bar in terms of in-house. Jim O'Neill should probably be thrown into some consideration there, especially now without Terrell Williams. So I think an out-of-house option is very much so on the table. We'll probably talk about in-house options tonight and then go from there. But I think they're both on the table. But the point is that Aaron Glenn was a part of building this foundation of who the Lions are. And if they're going to continue it, like Dan Campbell said that he aims to, we owe a lot of credit to Aaron Glenn. Shout out to Aaron Glenn, man. Rooting for him going forward. With that, I had heard rumors that he's, assembling his staff, and Mark Brunell could be a part of that, which I don't want to lose Mark Brunell. This was a guy that was coaching at a private college before he landed with the Lions, and they had a ton of success. By the time he left, they were winning 10 games versus when he got there, they were winning 3 games. He was there for years, and they had a ton of success when he was the head coach. Then he landed his first NFL job after being an NFL player as the Lions quarterback coach, and we've seen so much growth from Jared Goff in terms of, even just the way that he's getting into his drops as a quarterback out of the shotgun, started minimizing false steps. I think the pocket movement we saw this season, obviously we saw him take off a couple times, and he had one of his best rushing seasons ever. It was unique as heck. That's not something that he is, but he had one of his best rushing seasons ever, and I can't help but give some credit to Brunell in the development, because you see those things every day at training camp. And then, of course, what they would do in the passing attack, right? The way that he would use his eyes, the comfortability that he had, where he was setting his eyes, the control at the line of scrimmage. And I will say, even looking back on some of the old plays, some of it gave me Tanner Engstrand vibes, and I feel like I could feel the influence of Tanner Engstrand. Don't know that that's true, but I'm just throwing it out there. Side note. But all that being said, man, rooting for Aaron Glenn. I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.